Okay, so I think we can start. Thank you very much for coming to this workshop. Today we will be talking about the topic of engaging people and technologies in the future of energy with the focus of citizen energy communities. This is a clustering workshop that has been organized by several European projects. We have Lightness, Hestia, the creators, and LocalRES. And the idea is that to share the experiences, the difficulties, and what has been done in each of these projects to break or to be able to engage different actors, because we will see that in each of these projects there are different stakeholders that have been engaged, and how to really shed importance on the potential of the different technologies that have been developed within these projects in order to promote the energy communities as an alternative to meet the European ambition of a joint net zero emission of greenhouse gases by 2050. So we have these challenges, these difficulties that we are developing these innovation, these technologies, but as is the one of the main ideas of the energy communities is that we have to ensure that they are people-centered. So we have these challenges of how to engage them and the different actors in the co-design of the energy communities in order to work for the clean and fair energy transition. So this is the summary. We will have first a presentation of each one of these projects, and afterwards we will have an open debate with any of you can do questions or can do comments, and we will draw some conclusions. And without further ado, then I will introduce the first speaker of today. So for Lightness projects, we have Paula Jimenez. She is responsible for engagement and climate change in the social and environmental consultancy Trata Territorio, which is based in Madrid, Spain. As part of the social engagement and communication team of Lightness, she will be presenting approaches, practical experiences, and lessons learned when bridging the social and technological innovation in energy communities. So then you can share your screen and I will start mine, Paula.
Great. Thank you, Tatiana. Can you see my screen correctly?
Yes.
Great. Great. So thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to be in this workshop. As Tatiana was saying, I'll be presenting on behalf of the Lightness project, which is already halfway through. We've been working for 1.5 years. So I'll present some relevant strategies and preliminary results and learnings that we have obtained when promoting and trying to bridge the gap between social engagement and technological innovation when promoting energy communities. So I'll first do a brief introduction about Lightness, then I'll go into the working areas and more concretely the social and technological innovation areas and how we're creating tools, strategies and approaches that we're testing in the pilot sites. So in the third place, I'll go in depth about how those are being implemented in the pilot sites and practical challenges or learnings that we already have. And I'll wrap up with some key findings. So the Lightness project is focused on facilitating local engagement processes, also providing technological devices and monitoring tools to reduce energy consumption and CO2 emissions, There's also an important work being carried out regarding issue policy, policy recommendation for and guidelines for governments, and then, of course, raising broader awareness about the just energy transition. So one of the biggest goals and challenges at the same time is to shift the energy culture to generate long-lasting changes in the way we and all citizens and users of energy relate to energy. So this not only takes technological innovation, but it's also about complex engagement processes that manage to involve diverse people and changes their practices, perceptions, and knowledge about energy. So this is one of the fundamental challenges that we're facing, and that for which we have created some strategies that I'm going to share today. Regarding the working areas, we have 4. The social engagement, we're creating a low-cost technological package. We're also working on innovative business models and a regulatory roadmap. So for today, I'll focus for the purpose of the workshop on the first 2, so the social engagement and technological innovation package, and how we're bridging those 2 and working along with these 2 areas. So regarding the social innovation, the big goal is to involve people in the energy transition by co-creating their own energy community, which involves learning, creating bonds among end users, getting together, questioning, raising questions about their energy, and as I mentioned before, in general, shifting this energy culture. Shifting the energy culture is a very big question and takes a lot of big steps. But one of the biggest strategies that we have designed so far is the 3 engagement pillars. So in order to engage people in the use of technologies, in co-creating their energy community, in designing their organizational model, we think that these 3 pillars are fundamental in order to create and facilitate an enriching engagement process that also bridges with the social appropriation of technologies. So these pillars are exploration, recruitment, and co-design. Exploration is about analyzing and revealing the needs, wants, and desires of end users. So what do they want? What do they know already? What are their inner motivations to engage in an energy project or an energy community? Recruitment is about pitching the project to the end users and involving them. And here it's important to involve not only the male people of the household, which are typically more motivated, but also the elderly ones, the younger ones, women, the lower income households, those that have less time, or the energy literate businesses, but also municipalities. So there are a lot of actors here to bear in mind and to pitch the project in different ways with different value propositions and get them involved. And the third pillar is the co-design. So this is about creating moments, encounters, and complex processes for end users and stakeholders to co-create the organizational model or give feedback to the app and the technological innovations. So get people to co-design all the devices and the services that will be part of the energy community. These are 3 pillars that don't have to be, it's not like a chronological order, but it's the 3 fundamental pillars that help different typologies of energy communities to design and implement an engagement process, or that's what we think and we're doing in Lightness. Some tools that are useful in order to implement those pillars some of them are these. An interview guide, and interviews are a very valuable tool to reveal what do people want, what are their needs and desires, what are some hidden needs too. So interviews can be more formal or more informal. They can be a phone call interviews if people have less time, or it can be in-person, long, more formal and in-depth interviews if the people have the time to do it. This is a very social sciences and humanities crucial tool for us to really know what do people value and how to better design technologies and communities that serve them, that will be useful for them. Another tool is that we're also using in Lightness is the living engagement plans that integrate feedback loops. So this is before implementing the engagement, you of course need a plan, an engagement plan, and it's important, or we have seen that it's crucial for the plan to have feedback loops in which as the engagement plan is implemented, you compile information about the people, you get feedback from them, and then it feeds back into the plan in order to constantly improve it. We have also done relatable and human-centric brochures. So this is, as the photo shows, brochures with handmade drawings of people so that younger, elderly, different type of people feel related to it and see it as also a playful or interesting project to involve in. And lastly, a very generic one is facilitation tools. This is tools in order to think of dynamics for workshops, such as, for instance, future scenario dynamics to help end users think about what future do they want, what future in terms of energy do they want, and how can we better work towards it. And here I include the Plus for Kids, because we also have been creating games and dynamics for kids to be involved in these workshops and also participate in the co-design and the co-creation of the energy community. So we will publish all these tools shortly in a toolbox, but we can also discuss them more in depth later if you want. These are some photos of the workshops and the social engagement activities that we have been doing. I will later on talk more in depth about the pilots and how it's going on in the pilots. And then regarding the technological innovation, which is the other big working area that correlates with the engagement one, but has two specific devices that we're creating. One is a dashboard and the other one is a co-designed app. The dashboard is for pilot leaders. So it contains future scenario information for the pilot leaders to foresee different technical, environmental, and social aspects if different configurations of the energy community would go about, so they can make decisions in communication, of course, with the end users. And the other device is a co-designed app for end users to track their energy usage. And we have some photos because it's quite advanced. So for instance, this is the Italian dashboard. So it presents the results of the community, including multiple configurations of the energy community. So pilot leaders are using this platform to support communication with potential community members of the impact and financial viability of different options. For instance, the battery size. Some decisions have been made in the Italian pilot about the battery size regarding using the different scenarios of this dashboard. Then this is an image of the app. As you can see, the app has different widgets in order to gamify the way the information is shared. The idea is to give good information about the energy usage, the renewable energy generation, the consumption, and ways of gaining energy efficiency, and learn in a day-to-day basis how to shift those energy practices. Here, for instance, it shows you some tips regarding on the weather and considering some elements of the house. And now let's move on to the pilots, and we can see more concretely and in a more practical way how the social innovation and technological innovations are being implemented and some challenges that arise. So in the Polish pilots, so it's set in Wrocław, which is the largest city in the southwest Poland. So here we have two pilots of apartment blocks. And it's very relevant regarding this bridge between technological innovation and social. Here, the technological innovation is working perfectly, is being implemented. The app is almost set to go, but recruitment is blocking really the implementation of the Lightness solution. We have been testing different creative ideas, and now we kind of like unblock the situation. But for a very long time, we weren't able to talk to people and engage them in workshops or really any activity because they were immobile people, old people, and it was very hard to get to them. So this is a very clear example of how sometimes you have to be creative with the social innovation in order for the technologies to work. So some ideas that we tested were brochures, sending brochures and informational material in the mailboxes. We conducted in-depth interviews with the facility manager, which was the only person that we could get in contact with. But then the method that kind of like worked best was the door-to-door visits in order to go inside the houses, talk to them, explain them what the project was about. And this led us to a neighbor that is more active, has like a more leadership personality, and will be kind of like the ambassador of Lightness in the blocks. So this is a clear example of how sometimes unforeseeable things happen, and social innovation has to be creative in order for all the solution and the community to work. Regarding the Dutch pilots, we have two pilots. One of them is a social housing in Woerden, and the other one is a more urban development, new urban development in 4 which consists of single-family houses. So in Woerden, the elderly population is technologically and energy literate. Also here, door-to-door visits, phone calls, and street interviews work very well as recruitment methods. And one social engagement dynamic that worked very well for the technological innovation to kind of like uptake was the community game, which is a game that we created, a facilitation tool that we created in order for that allowed end users to situate themselves in the value of the energy community that they were most interested in. So here the result was that the biggest thing that they wanted was economic savings. So really reflecting on this and knowing this allowed us to create specific sessions for them to really know how to use the app towards energy efficiency and cost saving. So for instance, today they're having a workshop. They're using 11 participants are already using the app, and they're having a workshop to train people to use the app and learn about the widgets, to address people's questions, and also aspects that are unforeseeable, such as the skill set that people have when using technologies. And regarding the 4 the target group is more wealthy, they're homeowners. Here, the big challenge is that people don't have time to participate. So they're families with a lot of caring responsibilities and jobs. So here, the challenge is the time limit. This is, so I'm running out of time. But moving on to the Alginet pilot, the Spanish one, it's in a village of 13,000 inhabitants in Valencia, Spain. It's an electric cooperative that has been running from 1930, and it was created by a group of citizens. So here, recruitment, one of the valuable things of this type of communities where people already have social ties is that recruitment is easier, or getting people together is easier because they're already engaged and there's an important social fabric. But the singularity is that the potential users are spread throughout the area of operation, which makes the approach a bit different and can be a considerable barrier to recruitment. And in Spain, we still have the limitation of 500 meters for shared self-consumption. So there's but also regulatory limitations that create uncertainty among people. So it's the engagement, it's kind of like a back and forth of exchanging information, creating value propositions that are more or less concrete, but also allow people to co-design parts of the energy community. And then moving on to the last one, to the Italian pilot, it's an apartment building or condominium, which received the financial aid from a subsidy. So the building is being renovated. Here, one of the most, as in the Spanish one, the most valuable things is that the social ties among residents are enabling the engagement to be really smooth and successful. So one specific resident is very energy literate, and the information flow is it's really enriching because people really trust him. So the changing of practices, so this social cultural change of learning about energy, changing your practices, is much faster when there's that social tie and sense of community already, and there's kind of like a leadership role in which people trust, and the change is much faster. Another interesting thing about the pilot is that a crowdfunding campaign was done in December of 2021 to finance the retrofit, part of the retrofit of the smart condominium. So it was a very successful way of opening more accessible and sustainable ways of accessing financing. And finally, to wrap up, some key findings or reflections. Again, the driving challenge is to tackle the social cultural dimension of the transition, and sometimes technology is more of an ABC path, but the social innovation, it's what takes a lot of creativity, and for that, the social sciences and humanities methods are really interesting. So the interviews, facilitation tools, and another challenge that we're facing, or that tends to happen also in energy communities, is that pilot leaders sometimes have more of a technological skill set. So in Lightness, we are conducting some sessions to train pilot leaders on the social methods, and kind of like see how can they better reveal what are the needs and motivations of end users, and propose ways and workshops of tackling those. And yeah, just to wrap up, another big challenge that appears is engaging those that are in a more vulnerable situation, such as the elderly or the technologically or energy illiterate, the poor, and yeah, again, for that, the social sciences and humanities is a great way of creating those creative methods to engage them and get them to socially appropriate all the solutions, including the technological ones. So that's all from my side.
Thank you. That was very interesting. So next on, we will move on to the project Hestia, and it will be an interesting experience. Let's see how it goes, because we have actually a hybrid mode presentation. So we have here in the room Marta and online Angeliki. So let me introduce them, and then Marta, you can come here and take a stand. So Marta Arniani is heading the engagement in the Italian pilot of Hestia at the company Credibility. Her interest lies in designing and testing methodologies to make this energy transition inclusive, focusing on gender and energy digital literacy challenges. Her freelance consulting practice strives to align tech innovation with social justice within R&D projects. And joining her, we have Angeliki Akeli. She's a researcher in Aalborg University in Copenhagen, and she is leading the user engagement activities within Hestia. Angeliki is currently developing participatory methodologies for engaging households in European energy transition projects, and has a particular interest in the gender perspective of energy-related everyday practices. So, Marta, if you can come here. Okay.
Yes. Angeliki, can you present from your computer?
Angeliki, you're muted.
Angeliki, we can't hear you. You are muted.
No, but it's weird because I'm moderator, but I cannot.
Yeah, you should be able to.
No, we can't hear you. Hi, we can't hear anyone. Marta? You seem to be muted. I don't know if you're presenting already or we're waiting for Angeliki.
In the Dutch part, we have a majority of pensioners, and in the French one, what we call in French, jeune cadre dynamique, I would say, so young families with children, for half of the sociology, and the other half is pensioners. And the Italian one is completely different because it's in, the Dutch one is Borat, so not very far from Amsterdam. The French one is Palaiseau, which is not very far from Paris. And the Italian one is Berchidda, in the northern side of Sardinia. So there the configuration is completely different because the buildings are much older. And 2/3 of the people who are engaged in our project have solar panels installed. So they have some will and some interest, of course, to join an energy community. And it's mostly intergenerational families. Shall we? I can improvise if you want. But
So, can you, if you can wrap up now that they are hearing to you because they missed the first part, so.
they missed the first part.
Yes.
Okay, Hestia, it's a project doing demand response in 3 pilots in Italy, in the north of Sardinia, in the Netherlands, in Borhout, and which is close to Amsterdam, and in France, in the Flamenco-Del district, close to Paris. The Dutch and the French one are quite new dwellings, and the Italian one is more ancient buildings. So we can't hear Angeliki, right?
She's not connected right now.
Okay, so I will just take her on. In terms of approach to engagement and to projects, we have 3 main pillars. So we think that energy, doing demand response means understanding the habits and the dynamics at all. The second pillar is the fact that we should not give expertise for granted. So the expertise of the experts who are part of our projects is completely different from the one of people who are in pilots. And so it needs a sort of fine-tune when we communicate with people. And we need to consider how to share the expertise in a way that understands both the needs of developing new technologies, but also the needs of adopting them and understanding them. What we have done? Well, we have done a lot of things despite COVID, I have to say. We have been trying to bypass the COVID limitations with virtual interactions with the houses. So we've been doing virtual tours of their home, interviews. Then we have been doing co-design workshops in the different sites. And we have developed a booklet about our methodology and the different kinds of user interaction. This booklet has these main topics and recommendations. So we have recommendation about the household typologies. Then we have technical recommendations. I will go a bit more in details about this later. And then we have recommendations for community engagement. What interesting is that this is what happens. Now you have what you foresee in the project that is quite straightforward from point A to point Z. Then we have the everyday life and the disruption, everyday disruptions of habits, and the final result is actually to be adaptive.
Yes, Angeliki.
Okay, Angeliki, you want to?
Thank you, and sorry, I don't know what happened. I think it's the exact perfect session for people and technology for everything to break down. So really sorry for that. So I can pick up, and I think I won't share my screen. Maybe Marta, you can change the slide. So I mean. So I'll take you a little bit into what we've done so far in terms of developing this engagement kind of strategy, and what are the things that it's kind of almost like the highlights of the process. So to start off, we tried from the beginning, even before we go out on the pilots, to develop a quite inclusive approach to engaging people, try to understand what we will encounter on the different pilots. We have 3 quite diverse sites, as Marta probably already told you. So we needed to we were aware of issues that we need to be paying attention to, such as issues of age, gender, digital literacy, the different sociocultural backgrounds, and also what is considered a social norm. So what is actually normal to do in a community, which is actually quite important for when we are proposing changes in everyday life. And then the other thing we were thinking about, and it's quite a difficult thing to achieve, is when we talk about participation and when we talk about co-creating things, it's actually there's a lot of different levels that people can get engaged in, but we also need to be realistic about what can be achieved. So although in an ideal situation, we want our users and all the other stakeholders engaged all the time to do things together, how long can that last? So we need to also be realistic. So we actually started determining different kinds of levels of engagement, going from the simple informative events where people will have a less, like, let's say, involvement in the process, to more co-creation and kind of sessions where they can actually really give feedback and design together with the researchers and developers in the pilots. And at the same time, what we needed to kind of understand, and we try to design that in, is how this acceptance of these new solutions we're bringing in our case, the demand response, are going to be domesticated at home. How are they going to be taken and used and in the long term be absorbed in the everyday life of the household? Okay, so we can change the slide. Yeah, and I think, yeah, maybe Marta, I don't know if you were planning on talking on this, or yeah, these are.
I was in this activity, I can talk about this. Basically, what we have been trying to do at the very start of the project in the face-to-face interaction was to familiarize people with the main notions that we were going to employ. So for instance, in the first workshop we have done, they have been actively drawing their energy curve. And this led to a discussion already about the rabbits and who does what within the household and how different households compared within the community. Then in the other pilots, Angeliki, you want to say this?
Yeah, sure. So this is the Dutch pilot, and we had a couple of activities with them. The workshops were quite exciting because it was one of the first things that happened in people's lives after the lockdown sort of started easing up. So it was also the first opportunity for them to meet socially, and the project gave them a reason to kind of come together as a community, because this community is actually quite a new development also. So people have not been living there for a very long time. It's a couple of years maximum for those people that moved into the first homes. So we had two activities. One, in one of the groups, we actually, because the pilot is already using an existing app that the developers had given out to the homes. And then we wanted to see what people's feedback and what their experiences were from the first round before we actually introduce our own dashboard and our own kind of apps. So we did a discussion in groups, and it was kind of, people started discussing about their experience, the everyday experience with the technology. And then on the other group, on the other side of the room, we had actually a game which was about generating an energy community, but there were different steps and different stations, and people could actually decide collectively what would be the kind of future of their energy community. And that was almost like a preparation for what is happening in real life, because Furhat is becoming a new energy community. So that was a good way to see how people would reflect a little bit on things that are not completely fictional, but also relate to the experience that they will have in real life. Yeah. And then in France, in Camille Claudel, we have again a different side here. We have a lot of families with young children, we have students, and we have some social housing. There was a lot of games in the workshop that we ran again, and in this instance we wanted to, the first part was actually about engaging again with the idea of energy contracts and energy communities, and in this case people had to talk more about how they monetize energy, how they would sell or buy energy if they produce it at home. So seeing their changing roles as not just as consumers, but also as producers of energy, so the prosumption thing. And then we went into more detail into some specific everyday practice. So we talked a lot about, for example, cooking in this case, and we have some examples, or how can people, to avoid this big curve that happens and kind of reduce the use around the peak hours. can we introduce some new ways of perhaps asking people to batch cook or to eat raw or to and see the reaction, because of course this is just a long process that involves a lot of interconnected everyday practices. So it's not very easy to just introduce one change and expect it to catch and also to last. So there were different challenges in the workshop, but I think generally the workshop, again, as a method in this case, was a great way to put in context what that means for people's lives and to experience actually what people say. Yeah, so
about so if you remember the previous slide, yeah, there are some things that are unexpected when you do this kind of projects, and actually we had a pleasant opportunity, I would say, to work around the topic of gender inclusion, which was not part of our initial plans. It came out quite naturally, organically, looking at how people organize themselves in the pilot and the cultural context of the pilots. So basically, we see that gender has an influence, let's say, in three different areas. So how the division of tasks is organized within the household, which of course has an influence on how you handle and response. The expertise around the energy and around technology, and how the perception of being in control within the own household and trusting the technology is different across genders. So we have been doing focus groups with women in both the Italian and the Dutch pilot. What happened in the Italian one is that basically these women were enthusiastic about attending this activity, specifically because they had a moment dedicated to them, and it was possible to feel that their expertise of the everyday was taken into account. So they voiced the need of having more than one person in the household involved in this kind of projects, so that you don't have just the husband attending the event and then somebody else doing the housework. And because of this gender division that is quite traditional, I would say, in the Kindas, of course, we are talking about a pilot that is culturally very traditional. Women feel responsible for the project because, in a way, even if it's not them utilizing the technology, it's them implementing the actual demand response actions. And they all voiced a need to be really informed about the project, to be engaged continuously with face-to-face opportunities. And for instance, I can speak for the Italian pilot, of course, but this emerged as a need to keep going with having this kind of focus groups alongside the main assemblies, because, for instance, as a way to engage them, we are really putting a focus when we invite them to come with the whole family, even with the kids if they want, and we try to to avoid this situation where we will have the husband speaking in the assembly and the woman being silent in the corner, but then being the main implementer of the act. For what concerns World, it was similarly a need of learning to keep up with the project and not just being the receivers of an information that is mediated by somebody else. And they asked for more practical handbooks, so references where they could go back to when they need to implement the activities. And I think that in a way, women felt proved quite expert about the whole chain of energy power, let's say, and how the tariff is handled. And they also they would like to have more clarity about this. Angeliki, you want to give us this overview?
Yeah. So then we started kind of collecting things together and seeing what they look like across the three pilots. And we have, let's say, 4 areas that relate to both the development of technology, but as well as the engagement process. So starting off, an important aspect that we kind of observed is how this everyday household labor, like the housekeeping at home, is coordinated between people, and what are the gender implications, because this is quite important also for the embedment of technology. So as Marta said, also we noticed that there was a big difference between who actually performs the everyday tasks at home and who actually manages the energy systems or deals with the apps that relate to this energy system. So especially in Brigida, and that's what we put down, this coordination was not very good. So there was quite a clear division in the tasks, and that was quite gendered. So we observed like a lot of the women did the more traditional everyday housekeeping, and then the men would deal with the energy systems. That was put down according to our participants, not to stereotypical roles, but more about issues of schedule and availability. However, the community there, it is quite a traditional community, so there was a much higher representation of women still undertaking the majority of the everyday load in housekeeping. On the other hand, on the other two pilots, in terms of coordination, so in the French pilot, there was quite tight schedules. People were working quite a lot. So there were a lot of couples, for example, that it was all about establishing a rhythm. And within that rhythm, sometimes there's not even a tiny bit of space for any change. What if it's like a domino effect? Once you change one thing, then a lot of these other things collapse. So it was important for them to understand what is required so they can actually rearrange that and make it quite tight. And then in Voorhout, we noticed that there was kind of equal involvement in a way in the digital housekeeping, if you like, of the home. However, what we observed is that women were more concerned with the more long-term maintenance of the home as a whole. So how do we achieve things? How do we actually look after things when they break down? They weren't necessarily the ones that will go and check the battery or the fault or do what is needed, but they wanted to know who is responsible for that and how can we maintain this comfort at home? How can we make things convenient? Whereas men in this pilot were more focused on to the sorting out the small everyday things that relate to this energy housekeeping. So in terms of digital literacy or digital skills, again, it's really important for the uptake of the technology. We realize that it's not actually, we're not starting from the same point, especially between the pilots, but even amongst the pilots. So there were quite distinct digital literacy issues in Brigida, for example, in our Italian pilot, and a lot of this gendered expertise, again, a lot of it related to probably the fact that men were more involved with other similar kinds of technologies, and then therefore they had a better interest or a more intense interest to actually uptake these technologies compared to the women on the pilot. However, there was a lot of interest that was building up, and I think with the exposure and the continuous engagement, we hope that these skills are going to come up and kind of level themselves. And then again, in the other pilots, what we noticed is that we need to understand, to create opportunities for shared learning, particularly in Voorhout. That was quite clear, especially through the women's focus groups, that people need the time to get familiar with technologies and the platforms that we're talking about in order to be able to kind of make it part of their lives. Then in terms of frequency of interactions, because this is still an issue that concerns us quite a lot, we haven't actually finished with that, but what our first reflection so far is that we need to make sure not to actually stress users with too many requests or too many notifications. We actually did some sessions that we asked them to write their own notifications, and a lot of them took a really nice kind of light perspective, adding quite humorous stuff or a lot of visual. They quite like the idea of using emojis in Italy, for example, in the workshop that we did. So we need to find ways to keep people's interest and to personalize messages, but it's also important not to bombard them completely. It's also important to understand that there will be a lot of enthusiastic users, and in some cases they might actually want to do more, and we need to also find a way of how we put brakes on those over enthusiastic people and how we bring people closer if they are slower to uptake. And finally, in terms of motivation and long-term engagement, this is, as everywhere, the hardest thing. So we're trying to understand what is interesting to people, but also what is relevant to their lives. So what is meaningful and how it can be embedded within their lives rather than something that is completely external and something that needs completely new skills and understanding. Yeah, sorry, that was a very wordy slide.
We have two main topics to cover quickly. One is about the technology interfaces. These are mainly the 4 points that emerge. So a need for personalizing the interface as much as possible to make it relevant to people, to establish a feedback loop between the users and the platform, both for matters of trust and also for matters of improving the platform continuously with feedback. Angeliki already spoke about notifications to make basically not overload users and to simplify them as much as possible. And I think that the last point is the most important one, to have really a design of the platform that is inclusive and understandable for people, and that is that gives the possibility for the community to learn new things. So the platform as a sort of hook for producing more knowledge within the community. And as a recap, this is more or less the points that we touched so far. So that you need to really understand the dynamics of the everyday life at home in order to do a proper DR. Bearing in mind that your project understanding of energy is different than the one from the users, and this needs to understand also the expectations of both the participants and the technicians, and that you need to keep the communication and engagement on. It's not just something that you do on the spot for a specific phases of the project. That it's important to understand the know-how and the expectations of people. And finally, the customization of the solution as much as possible, because we see that within the same pilot, and without saying the least, across different pilots, the situation and the scenarios can be. Yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot for your attention. Thanks, Angeliki.
Thank you.
So next we move on with the project LocalRES, and for that we have here in the room Julia Blanc. She is a senior researcher at Ulster Technological University in Cork, Ireland. And in the project LocalRES, she is contributing with psychological models of behavior under technological operationalization, as well as with participatory design approaches for renewable energy communities. So, Julia, I will give you the room, and maybe you can pass it because she will be using her own. Oh, no. Okay, so you will be doing it.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for your time. I will present the LocalRES project, and particularly a case study of European small-town renewable energy communities. And we chose an approach for participatory design to develop supporting tools as a vehicle to engage and understand local communities and their energy-related concerns. So we are currently having a shift of paradigm in the energy sector from mainly, for example, few large power plant productions to small power producers, or from centralized markets to a more decentralized approach. And this implies in particularly that traditional, more passive consumers need to take an active role. Looking at the technological side only, the technologies for this transition is already available at a high TRL. So why are we still not there yet? A recurring issue when we are trying to implement new technical solutions is that people need to be kept on board. And this is a challenge which has been acknowledged more and more in recent years. And we can observe a policy shift from focusing on purely technical solutions towards social innovations. For example, the clean energy package is not just looking at technical solutions only, but also is interested in the social aspects. One important example is establishing renewable energy communities as a new focal point that aims to encourage more citizens to get actively involved. So, a renewable energy community is intended to be a legal entity which must be voluntary and autonomous, with primary purpose to provide environmental, economic, or social community benefits. Doesn't work. Sorry. The renewable energy community is a vehicle to address some of the social challenges of the energy transition. So unfortunately, the PowerPoint isn't working like I want it to work. So I will work.
I think it will be a thing. We can change it if you want.
No, it's they're thinking coming in over the time, but it's already all there. So sorry for that. So we can identify three main social dimensions in the context of the energy transition. First, the energy transition needs people to accept new technologies in their daily lives and adapt their behavior accordingly. Second, people must engage on an individual and on a community level. And finally, they have to decide on investments and participate in the operation of the assets and systems. So social innovation along all these axes is necessary. The LocalRES project and its activities can be visualized on the three described levels. It focuses on local energy communities, technological scenarios, and community goals. Tools like an app or a web page can support renewable energy communities, for example, by helping to understand technical or social implications of community goals and scenarios. If we want to be serious about involving citizens in the energy transition, we have to make sure that we develop relevant technologies with them instead of just for them. So this approach has been called participatory design or co-design. The idea is to involve all relevant stakeholders in the development process from a very early stage. This gives everyone a voice and provides valuable insights, not only for the products to be developed, but also in the community itself. So in LocalRES, we use the two-step approach to understand the local energy communities in the project pilot sites. We started with a series of representative workshops together with the community leaders to identify specific goals and scenarios that are considered to be relevant for the different communities. Based on this initial understanding, we developed and ran a second phase of workshops with citizens of the communities to collect their feedback on these goals and scenarios, but also on their needs and concerns around their own energy community. We collected both qualitative and quantitative data and I will present both from both sides a few results. But first, the LocalRES pilot sites are all small towns in different regions across Europe. We have Czechia in Finland. It's a little island with a little bit more than 200 inhabitants. We have Ispasta in North Spain with around 750 inhabitants. Then we have Ollersdorf in Austria with around 1,000 inhabitants, and Berkida, the biggest one, which was already mentioned by Hestia. It's also part of LocalRES, and in Sardinia, Italy, with around 2,000, a little bit more than 2,500 inhabitants. The renewable energy community in Ollersdorf presented itself as the most advanced and well-established community of the four we engaged with. The workshop participants were mainly older and male, which we found to be the case across the board. And one of the main community goals was to achieve 100% renewable energy for the community. Then Berkida, as I mentioned, is part of a couple of EU projects at the moment. In comparison to the other three, their focus was very strongly on the financial aspects of renewable energy communities, but there was also a discussion on privacy issues around supporting tools. Consequently, one of the main goals here was to save on the cost of energy. Ispasta is a very young community and not yet fully established. Therefore, the workshop offered the opportunity to discuss general aspects around creating the community itself. And here, a specific scenario was, for example, the upgrading of public buildings, particularly the school was a focus of interest. And finally, the citizen workshop in Czechia showed that participants had a general interest in the overall project and the other demo sites. The strong focus here was on how to establish so-called heroes or energy champions to improve the communication between energy experts and citizens. And a very specific scenario for Czechia as a little island is the development of the EV infrastructure, not just for cars, but also for boats. So let's look at some quantitative key findings, which we collected by providing a questionnaire during the workshops to all participants. The presented results, or I only present results which are found to be statistically significant. So first we try to understand the engagement with renewable energy communities in general. And we found that overall, as mentioned before, male participants have been found to be more likely to engage with renewable energy community activities. Then we looked at how supporting tools can be used to support renewable energy communities. And we observed that participants who were interested in taking part in the decision process also found that the supporting tool could be helpful. While in Berkida, the privacy issues, as mentioned before, could be shown as a major concern. Regarding the use of supporting tools, we did not observe a similar significant correlation anywhere else. So next, we asked the question for whom the tool should be designed for. And in Ollersdorf, we observed a correlation between age and expert use. The older participants didn't want the tools to only address experts, but at the same time, they also did not want to use the tools on their own. This implies a desire to co-design renewable energy communities in a group setting amongst the older age group, whereas younger participants are leaning more towards expert and individual use. So, and finally, we looked at the preferred platforms of community supporting tools. And participants in Berkida were more interested in a mobile application compared with Czechia and Ollersdorf. The latter being more interested in a web page, although younger people there were also leaning more towards a mobile application. And what this shows is that the target platforms need to consider different demographics, preferences, and also technological literacy. And all the participants also looked for non-electronic means of communication. So in Ottersdorf, we also observed a gender difference, with female participants preferring mobile phone applications and male participants preferring a web page. So we also evaluated the qualitative feedback from participants during the citizen workshops, and we identified 3 main areas of interest. We got technical, economic, and social aspects. On the technical level, participants would like to see more real data used and understand the financial impact achieved by the energy savings. However, what the feedback really showed was that the development of the community itself was a topic of primary importance to many participants. Communication and coordination between members of the community was a topic mentioned frequently as an important aspect of supporting activities and tools. The limitations we saw are that of this particular study was that the selection bias, and only interested parties took part in the workshops, and we observed, as mentioned before, a strong overrepresentation of older male participants. So, what are the implications for a renewable energy community? To establish and support renewable energy communities, 3 points need to be considered: the technical realization, financial and economic implications, and social dimensions and communication. And not to forget, specific requirements on an individual and community level needs to be considered as well. So, what is the take-home message? Renewable energy communities are a novel approach to address the energy transition. Not only the technical, but also the social dimension needs to be addressed. And finally, co-creation can foster active engagement and empower citizens to take part and make informed decisions regarding energy community relevant topics. That's from me. Thank you very much.
No time for questions for this?
Yes. Yes, we will have the questions after the last presentation, which will come next.
I remember that.
Take a note of it. Because otherwise we can, start the debate and don't have time for all the presentations, so to avoid that. So lastly, we will go with the project creators, which will be presented by Blanca Barrios. She is an energy engineer at Art1 Solutions, and she has been involved in projects related to energy services and energy communities, both in Spain and in Europe. Today, she is representing the project creators, in which she is leading activities related to communication, replication, and market engagement. So I leave you to my colleague.
Hi everyone, I'm Blanca, and I'm gonna start asking you something. So we all have this, so I want you to put it on front because we are gonna try to make it a bit more interactive since it's the last presentation of the session, and we have already talked about a lot of things about engagement, especially engagement on residential sector. And I will take a different approach because the project that I'm representing today, Creators, does not really focus on the residential sector, rather more like in bigger projects related mainly with industrial sector. So please put it on front of you because I'm gonna read questions. If you don't understand a point, that's it. Okay. So Creators. The project stands for Creating Community Energy Systems. Okay, so today that we are discussing about engaging people and technology is focused on community energy system. So first question, what do you think are the two most important things when creating a community energy system? 2 words. It's related to the title of the session, so this is an easy one.
You look at the title, but of course, it's regulation. Regulation is decisive. And of course, it's people who want to be part of this. And I come from Austria, and now we have a big wave of energy communities being established, maybe 150, because the gas crisis has suddenly woken up people. Now they want to push this.
Okay, so we got one, people, and then the second one, like to properly define the energy community, again, it's in the title.
Yeah, it's in the title, but my opinion is a bit different.
Well, of course, regulation is important, but when we are really, aside from regulation, we will go for 2 main things, people and technology. Of course, we need to have the technology to develop it, and we need to get the people to set up the energy community. Of course, regulation is like the framework that covers everything, so it's of course important. But once the regulation is available, people and technology. Second,
I want to make that last comment.
Okay.
The question is the regulation for which technology? Most energy communities focus only on the electricity side, no sector coupling, and only in PV, and then you don't have the business models. For example, in Austria, the regulation is purely focused on electricity, and this excludes many other technologies.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So the regulation as enabler or blocker of technologies.
Definitely.
Sorry for speaking so much.
No, thank you, thank you. Next question. What do you think is easier, to get people or to get the technology? Technology is easier. Okay, that's why we're here. People, easy one. Okay, and the last question. If you were to start an energy community here in Nice, with all the city, who would you talk to? One person. Who would you talk to? You want to start an energy community here, which person would you choose?
The manager of the city.
Great. So basically with these 3 main comments, we are going to start the session. So the project today I'm representing, and I'm going to tell you experiences about, it's creators. So first, what is creators? Creators is an SP2022 project that stands for Creating Community Energy Systems, and basically aims to accelerate the integration of community energy systems in Europe. It's a 3 years project, and as all European projects, there are many people involved. In our case, 16 partners from 8 European countries. And the objectives of this project is, aside from speeding up the integration of community energy system, is to develop applications, develop technology and services for energy community. And also with people, we want to help the initiators, the community energy systems promoters, throughout the whole life cycle of the project. And then how we do it, we don't really want to provide technology, but what we want to provide is a service. So we are conceptualizing community energy system as a service. And as a side effect will be increase, of course, the penetration of renewable energy and empower the consumers. So, okay, when we are talking about the life cycle of an energy community, basically we go from the beginning to the end, from the conceptualization of the energy community, the planification, the planning, the implementation, and the operation. So in creators, we are developing applications and services for each phase. The idea is to accompany this person that is going to take the decisions throughout the project. So as part of the project, we are developing a simulation and emulation engine to address all the technological parts of the energy community. We also are developing digital twins, not only when we have the design of the energy community to test if it's a proper one. And regarding the implementation, we are also delivering business model, financing, and contracting protocols in order to make it easier for this person. And in the operation of the energy community, we are also advancing an energy exchange platform for once the project is established, we will be able to do the energy exchange in the community. So basically, as I said earlier, our value proposition as creators is to to provide community energy system as a service that we can provide to help someone to create an energy community. And then this service will go design of the energy community, choose, of course, the technologies that will be involved, solar energy, wind energy, storage, whatever. Test if this design is appropriate, it's accurate. Find ways to invest, find the funding for this kind of projects. How to contract, what's the best way to contract, and of course, how to operate the energy community. And then how is our strategy to involve people and technology? So as I said earlier, we, for example, when we engage people, first we have to have the main contact, the key person. So we are usually targeting integrators, local initiators, or local service providers. What is this for? Because in our project, we are our final uses for the energy, the kind of energy communities that we are trying to promote are big consumers, business parks, apartment buildings, industrial consumers, tertiary sector public buildings. So we need to find one person that is going to be the link among everyone involved. So basically here in the image at the right, in order to create an energy community, there has to be three things interconnected. The initiator of the energy community, the person that is going to be the push, and sometimes even take some of the decisions, the energy service provider, and of course the final user, the final consumer. And then now, for example, in the creators pilots, I want to show you some examples about what are the pilots that we have, so you will understand our experience. For example, we have the Port of Barcelona in Spain, we have an industrial park in Belgium, a steel plant in Slovenia, a municipality in Estonia. Also, we have a mall in Slovenia, an island in France, Guadeloupe Island, France, a waste disposal facility in Bulgaria, office building in Netherlands, another industrial park, and a residential and an SME area in Netherlands. So basically, even though in some of the projects there are residential users, it's not the target. For example, in the mall in Slovenia, of course, if we are going to start just the main idea of starting an energy community in a mall, who would we talk to? Fabio?
The general manager.
Okay, so that's why we like, in order to take the first step, we need to find a key person. So here I'm gonna tell you some examples. For example, in the Port of Barcelona, we talked to the legal entity of the Port of Barcelona that connected all the people. For example, this pilot is composed of several buildings, public buildings, restaurant, a fisherman, a community. So we need someone that is there, that knows the people, that know their needs, and that can be the link among them. In the mall in Slovenia, we had the mall manager. In the industrial park of Belgium, we talked to the construction company, and this construction company owns some of the buildings, and also both industrial and residential. And for example, in an industrial park in Spain, we talked to Promover Burgos, which is a public company that belongs to the government, to the local government, that of course is in touch with all the companies within this industrial park. And it provides trust, to the companies that someone is helping them, someone is supporting them, someone that is actually looking for their interests. And of course, once we have the initiator, we need to also get the initiator on board. So the first person we have to convince is the initiator itself. How do we do it? We have to provide them a technological solution. That's why we have our technological package to do the simulation results, the financial estimations, and of course we have to do knowledge sharing. We have to explain what it is because, of course, energy community is something kind of new, and people are not really familiar with this. Not only residential or someone that owns a building, but also even the initiators, they're not really familiar with the concept itself. They don't really understand it. So, of course, when we have the initiator on board, we do workshops with the final user, with the people involved, with the site owners. And, for example, this is an example of a poster, that's the poster of the project, that was also translated into the local language so they can also understand. Because we noticed that even though nowadays a lot of people speak English, not everyone speaks English. And that's something true, so they might feel more comfortable if that workshop is in their local language and they can read information in their local language. And also it's like, okay, how do we engage initiators? We can do two approaches. Direct approach, which is basically at the end, talk to people, just try to find this person, how can we approach, for example, I don't know, the mayor of Nice. I don't know, we have to try, but you know, we can do a direct approach either with a company or a contact or a message, or we can do an indirect approach. For example, in creators, we launched an open call, which basically our value of this open call was to deliver a free pre-feasibility study for community energy systems. So we opened this in our website, and then what we were telling us that we would make the first study of an energy community for them, covering both technical, governance, and financial analysis, which was also a good way to get people. And we got some applications from people from municipalities that we didn't know. So it was quite a good approach. And also, for example, as part of the project, we are also implementing a super quick online assessment tool for energy communities, very easy, that will be available in the website maybe in a couple of months. That I guess someone that is just curious about energy communities will fill it in, like run the, introduce the information that is requested, and maybe after that, the person will get some contacts or some information on how to proceed, and then maybe we will get the interest of this person, and this person will contact us. So this person will be the initiator of the energy community. So basically, that's my presentation. And then the highlights that I wanted for the wrap-up is basically the project creators is not really targeting residential, it's targeting big consumers. And at the end, for a big consumer, for a mall, for example, we cannot go and talk to each store because then it would be impossible to take the sessions. That's why we need to find always one person that will help us to link them. And then, yeah, that's basically this, because that person will know them, will know their needs, and will be the perfect contact point also to establish the information. So this is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blanca. So, they have. So we will start the debate. I know there are some questions, so I will reserve mine because I also have some questions, and maybe I will do it in private because we don't have much time left. So in order to be able to work and that everyone can hear, maybe if Marta and Julia can come here, please. So in that way, people online can also hear you. Okay, perfect. I'm going to can sit. Yes, if you don't mind, you can be here and more or less close to the computer. Okay, thank you. And sorry for all the mess. So I think in the break we have some questions. You, sir, had one question that you wanted to ask in LocalRES presentation.
Yeah, well, this was kind of more a joke kind of a question. But the more important is the last presentation where it focused on the key persons. Well, in Holland we've got now about 700 energy corporations, cooperatives, and we've got a kind of experience with it, and it's all kinds of social development, it's group development. And a group is not developed by a key person. So I agree with you that at a certain stage you need a key person to develop it further, but you have to start with one person who likes to put energy in the project, he talks to his neighbor, and they get together, and then it grows. And the names say maybe the key person, but it all starts very, very bottom up. This is very important in our experience, so I want to add this to your presentation.
So I don't know if you were able to hear online. Yes? Okay, excellent. Thank We have any other question here in the room?
I have one maybe.
Please go ahead.
What is the big difference between residential communities and like commercial communities, business parks?
Okay.
In my country, there are no business parks that form energy communities. It's always neighborhoods, villages. Companies don't know how to make this happen.
Do you want to?
So maybe I can start talking about the commercial part, and then maybe one of them can support in the residential. Basically, I would say that from my experience, from creators' experience, for us it's usually easier to target big consumers. Why? Because they pay a lot in their energy bill, and it's part of their business. So, and sometimes, like lately, with all the rising of prices, what happened with the gas, like all the situation, the pandemic, maybe they were paying an amount, and during this year they were paying the double. What does it mean? But either, for example, if they are like somehow producing something that they're gonna sell, they either increase the price of the product they are selling to be profitable, or they start getting losses, and then the company has to close. So basically, usually this kind of people, the electricity is something that it's really important for them and for their business and for the sustainability of the business. That's why, from our perspective, they are more willing to do it. And then maybe they can share their experience from what it's like in a residential community.
Well, residential, I think what might be the difference is that there's a higher commitment. People are better involved because it's more. They feel individually better addressed. In a commercial community, I could imagine that this is, yes, the place where you work or so, but it's not so, you might be not so committed because it's not your own money necessarily, which you're talking about while you are in a residential area. It's your personal solar panel or whatever you invest in. So that might be a big difference between the two communities.
And I think there's also a collective part, a sense of belonging and a sense of orienting the community in general. For instance, in the Italian pilot, we have a strong drive from the municipality, establish the town as one that is sustainable. And people actually recognizing this image and are willing to work towards it to get there.
Yeah, in residential communities, you create communities with people. But in the business part, this is not the case. Yeah. It's very different. So
yeah, I think the approach is really the difference. So maybe in the commercial communities, you have to drive, as Blanca was saying, more towards the energy savings, more towards the electricity bill. So to really engagement, while what we have seen today to really do this engagement in the residential area is to go further than just the energy savings part, because of course there is this human touch that you need to address and that affects their daily life. So they have to be willing to do it for something else than just the money. So the approach is different, although I think we have to remember, especially when we are talking about energy communities, that the ideal of what is established in the European directives is that it's really an involvement of the three main actors, so the municipalities or the public administration, the citizens, and also the businesses. So the idea would be really to be able to all of them to work together towards creating and consuming and selling and etc. their own energy. And of course, it's very difficult to achieve because it's like a big scale, but we can start with these pilots of smaller projects in purely residential or purely commercial parts, and then enlarge them. And we have one question. Yes. Do you want to add something? Okay. Okay. But before we are going to address one question that we have online because it was done previously, so I will read it. Okay, it's from Dimitris, and he asked, how do you engage with stakeholders? How is the invitation reaching them out so you can have group gather? Do you go door to door? You ask the municipality to assist you with mailing lists? So basically, he wants to know, like, what is the best methodology to engage with stakeholders, and how do you also leverage the part of people that are illiteracy, as you were mentioning in your presentation? How do you excite them?
Well, for what concerns Hestia, I have to say that the role of local public powers, at least in 2 pilots, was quite important in reaching out to people. So we leveraged their channels, and we leveraged their existing plans and strategies for energy in general. And in the Dutch pilot, it was the developer who was the one who kind of headed this engagement part. And I have to say that one interesting thing, it's also searching for the experts within the community. So I have to say that people, let's say the early adopters of solar panels, for instance, were also the ones who were more pushy towards their neighbors and more present during the workshops, and trying to, they kind of work as mediators too. So it's interesting for the next phases to see also how we can engage with them. Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know if you have other things to add.
I can add, maybe it's very different from pilot side to pilot side from my experience. So for example, in Czechia in Finland, the people were contacted also by letter, by post. So it was a very traditional way. While in Ispasta, the mayor and important people addressed the people on the street, talked to them, and asked them if they like to join. So it was a very different approach. So and it's every pilot site is different. So there were a lot of different channels used parallel. So Facebook, the local newspaper, so face-to-face invitations or the letters. Emails also. So there were a very broad approach to address the people.
Yeah, and that is also one point that both of you commented in your presentations, that the approach has to be really customized to...
Yeah, if I can add something about that, it's not that easy. I mean, it's not that you have a fantastic participatory strategy and that's it.
Yeah.
From my personal experience, it's really getting to know the people, at least for the first group of people that you engage. Then, once the community is established, it's easier because people totally think that. But at the very start, it's really a tailored communication, almost an individual one, trying to understand, know each other, and even on a personal level, I would say. So it requires a lot of curation and a lot of time, and this time factor should not be under evaluated.
Yeah, I totally agree. If I can jump in to answer Dimitri's questions too. Yeah, I also agree that time it tends to be a resource that is undervalued, and it takes a lot of time in order to talk to people and engage them. Regarding the questions about how to get the contacts or reach people, Dimitrius was asking, do you ask a municipality to assist you with a mailing list? From our experience, it's a good method to create a sociogram before, which is a map of agents that there are, for instance, local associations, groups that are already existing, and start talking to them, getting in contact with them, and kind of like get people on board from already existing platforms. Another way that we have explored is getting in contact with the social services or equity departments of the municipalities to reach people in a situation of energy poverty or economic poverty that are that could be more difficult to approach. So those are two methods that for Lightness kind of worked. And door-to-door visits, what if it's the case, because when you're creating a community in a city or in a town, door-to-door visits might not work because it's super time-consuming, but if it's one residential building, it's a great method. So yeah, these are some ideas.
So we're actually a little bit past the time that we had for our workshop. I know there are still some pending questions. We will try, if people online wants to drop it in the chat. I know that there is one more question that has arrived. Then maybe I can pass it to the speakers, and maybe we can answer them via the Hopin platform. And for the people here in the room, we had one pending question, and for the rest, I think you can ask them directly during the break, because otherwise we are going to take time of the next workshop. So sorry, I know it's very interesting. So do you want to do the last question? Okay. So thank you very much for your attendance and your participation, and I want to close with an applause for all the wonderful speakers that we had today.